Welcome to Talkkcade, a podcast based on reviewing WWF, ECW, and WCW content on a week-by-week basis from a first-time viewer's perspective. I'm Advi Devin, first-time 90s wrestling viewer and co-founder of WatchaMania. We're currently in the week of June 27th to July 2nd of 1994, starting with WWF Monday Night Raw. Now, before we get started, I just want to ask that you drop a thumbs up on this video as it really helps us a lot. Do subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell to always on for notifications. Talkkcade always seems to come out at some random hour of the night, and not always the same night. So you want to catch it when it drops. That all being said, let's dive into some Raw. So we open up Raw with a recap of Lawler's assault on Duke Drossy with his own trash can from the last episode. We get a pre-tape of Duke saying that it's one thing to jump him, but it's another to hit him with his own trash can, and that he knows what he plans on doing to Lawler. Lawler responds in kind, putting the blame for this all on Duke, starting back when he first dumps the trash onto Lawler on his way to his own match. His rant gets cut off by someone on the side, telling him he knows what he's there for. It's like very serious and just cuts off the energy. And he dances around apologizing for his action, making excuses and suggesting that they should just fine him or suspend him. He's a king. He struggles and squeaks it out meekly, but he has to redo it, which he barely does. It was a cookie cutter opening, and I'm more convinced this is a feud for WWF Mania than I was from last episode. But, I'm not even sure if that show's still a thing, but this makes it feel like it is. So we get the banging intro as always, and we go right into our opening as Mabel's music hits. We had ourselves a big Meaty Men classic here. Still, I love me some Bam Bam. Something about seeing a big man do a quarter roll that really makes you go, ooh. So these two lads go back and forth for about 2 minutes. But just as Bam Bam starts to level Mabel hulks up. He fought back against him for a moment, but Mabel drops Bam Bam and hits a running or walking leg drop on him. Luna starts yelling and flipping her lid on the apron, and Mabel just wonders what the crazy lady is doing, which allows Bam Bam to recover and avoid a follow-up running elbow drop, which, not for nothing, wouldn't have looked like it would have hurt much anyways. Luna, still up on the apron, is sent hilariously flying out of shot as Mabel runs the ropes, only to get caught with a Mabel runs the ropes, as Bam Bam runs the ropes, only to get caught with a Mabel clothesline. Oscar goes to check up on Luna, who's, motionless on the outside, complete dead weight. But Bam Bam rushes out, shoves Oscar off his feet, thinking the worst. While he's checking on Luna, Mabel comes out and splashes Bam Bam, causing him to drop a still limp Luna, and her head looked like it hit the bottom bar of the guardrail all over again. It was rough, but she really was selling the sandbag. The finish came when Mabel and Bam Bam got caught up in back and forth punches, but you heard the count at 9. They both went to slide in, but then Bam Bam stopped and went back like he forgot something and went to help Luna instead of break the count. He could have just rolled and broke the count and then went to go check on her, but no, all of a sudden it crossed his mind at that moment he had to check. It was very obviously a missed beat, and I didn't even catch the first time around, but Bam Bam looked like he decided to lose for the sake of checking on her. What's worse is that he acted like he was upset by the loss. He was confused that he was counted out and then started shaking the rope and stomping in frustration. And I feel bad because I know what the intent was and I like Bam Bam, but how it played out made very little sense. Especially because Luna was up on her feet by the time Bam Bam was flipping out in the ring. So Ted DiBiase comes down to the ring as Luna Vachon calms down Bam Bam a bit, and it looks like he's trying to pitch something to them. And it's at this time the commentary brings up an edition of Heartbreak Hotel on the June 11th edition of Superstars, where Ted DiBiase introduced his new Undertaker. Even on the watch-along, I could immediately tell that this was not Undertaker, and I suppose in hindsight, they wanted the viewer to pick up on that. Ted DiBiase couldn't get the actual Undertaker back under his buck, so he went and bought a new one. That's the vibe I got. That being said, it makes Randy Savage seem dumb because he's out here like, it broke my heart to see the Undertaker. I'm not going to do the impression, but he's like, it broke my heart to see the Undertaker coming down with the $1 Million Man. And it's like, like it was some tragic heel turn Y, Taker Y kind of energy. Still, this is something I'm looking forward to seeing play out. You know, if that's the real Undertaker kayfabe wise, then it feels like they hired someone else to replace Mike Calloway. Like that's the energy I got. It's a different person there, absolutely. As for this match, it was all right. It was about 5 minutes or so. It mostly served the purpose of having Bam Bam lose, so Ted DiBiase could come out here and take advantage of Bigelow being down on his luck. That's what I took away from the situation. I'm wondering what becomes of this DiBiase money stable. So we take a break and return to ringside where IRS is coming down for his match, cutting his usual do your taxes or else promo. Very boring match, but interesting STF to win it with. IRS, he did his usual grabbing the ropes bit that I'm starting to see as his go-to for heat. And he doesn't even always do it the best, circa King of the Ring. Commentary puts over his technique and the fact that he's a two-time All-American, but the brooding pace in his matches are always so daunting, especially when he does a nothing rest hold to kill a minute or two at a time. Commentary also brought up his association with Ted DiBiase before informing us of IRS versus Doink on the next WWF Superstars, so I get the impression that he's getting involved with this Ted DiBiase situation as well. This episode seemed a little DiBiase-centric, as this is not the last we hear of Ted this evening. The finish was really the most notable thing, because it was a calf-crushing variant of the STF, where the leg was going inside instead of outside, and smushing the calf in the process. And like John Cena or Samoa Joe normally do, no, it was more so hooked inside. The grip also torqued Rick Myers, the guy he was facing. He torqued his neck in a way that had his arms flailing off the mat, almost like he was stiff from the hold. So in all honesty, it was the most actually painful looking STF I think I've ever seen. And it bums me out that it was this guy who did it of all people. Because IRS is boring as all get up. To watch, at least. Hell, I don't even know if it was meant to look that good or not, time will tell the next time we see him put it in, I guess. So, we return from break to Jerry Lawler on the King's Court set, yelling at the crowd about the Hart Foundation. He brings it around to put over Jim Neidhart as the backbone of that team as he introduces the Anvil as his guest for the week. The segment overall was a bit bumpy, but I'm here for the layers into it. Not into it. I wonder how genuine Jim's in character is. I wonder how genuine Jim in character is when he says what he says about Brett. I'll get into it. First, a point made by Gorilla that at least I missed on the watch along was that Jim came out to the Hart Foundation thing. So yeah, Jerry apologizes to Jim for the reception, which is funny considering the opening bit. Jerry's apologizing. Jim starts off by reaffirming that introduction, that he is the Hart Foundation. He goes on to say how ungrateful Brett is for how many times he's pulled Brett out of a bad situation or offered him successful advice. King keeps trying to stir the pot, assuring that Brett hasn't thanked Jim every single time he helped him, to which Jim claims he's never gotten a single thank you. Jim claims that when Brett needed backup for the situation with Diesel, he called on Jim, to which Gorilla on commentary, rudely but correctly, reminds us that it was Jim who volunteered to look out for Brett. I like that because it invalidates the slanderous claims to a certain extent, so we don't just think, dang, Brett's a total jerk, while still being able to drive the plot. That being said, the Anvil confirms that he did indeed make sure that the title stayed in Brett's possession so that Owen Hart, its rightful owner, could lay claim to it. They bring out Owen Hart, new entrance and lighting and all. Owen claims he's finally getting all the respect that he sought after. He's got the crown and scepter, and two royal friends to stand by his side. Owen claims that he's finally going to get the respect that he sought out. He once again says that he will no longer be known as the Rocket and proclaims himself the King of Hearts. Owen claims that he knows that Brett is scared because the reality is exactly as Owen said it would be. He once again says that Brett bullied him all his life and made him feel like nothing. That Brett kept Owen in his shadow, but Owen is now stepping out of it. Owen says that there's only one thing left to do, and that's take the title from Brett, because he knows that he can do it. And Owen's music hit after he finished talking, but Jerry still went out of his way to thank Owen and invite him back to be a guest again, to which Owen cordially accepted. All while the music is playing, you could tell they were really pushing time. And here's the thing. I enjoyed this segment in one ways, but I do think it carried on a bit long. I don't necessarily think it dragged, but that it was longer than it needed to be. With having two guests at one time, that draws it out a bit already, so maybe something could have been trimmed there. Maybe less fluff from Jerry at the beginning. I don't know. I love Owen, but he didn't need 4 minutes, and based on the music playing at the end, I got the impression that the segment went over time to some extent. Critiques out of the way, I'm really looking forward to this match, should it finally be made. I need to see Owen finally get his chance at the title that he kind of laid claim to before Brett even won it. So we cut to Lex Luger, lacing up his boots before we take a break, and return to the entrance of the Head Shrinkers, who came out for a match against the Executioners. We get some jokes from Savage and Monsoon on commentary about the number of executions there are, so I can't help but feel like there's more to these characters than just generic black wrestling mask. We get a roulette of the Head Shrinkers offense throughout this match, all while the commentators continue to tease the Heavenly Bodies challenging for the titles, as did Jim Cornette on last week's episode. A moment later, though, the commentators started bucking out over some conflict in the back involving Ted DiBiase. There was this fun spot that I don't think I ever seen, where Samu had his opponent cornered. Samu was up on the middle rope, like you usually are for the 10 punches, but he does a DDT to his opponent from that position instead. I thought it was pretty awesome, honestly, because it's like, it feels so simple, but I've never seen anybody do it. So after a few more double team moves, the Head Shrinkers finish it off with a flying splash, and it was a fun showcase match for them. It was a good watch. It was nice to see the champions in action. It was a very minimally featured division here on Raw. So we cut back to the back where the cameraman is moving into the locker room, where DiBiase and Volkov is proposing an offer that can't be refused to Bam Bam and Luda. They see the camera, and Ted has Volkov force them off as we cut away. So that was made to sound like it was going to be much more hostile by the commentators and their excitement over the situation. Still, good to see follow-up on DiBiase potentially having a new business partner in Bam Bam after the top of the show. We get a video package for Double J versus Tatanka and for The Undertaker's return to Raw, both on next week's episode. And it's interesting to see if this DiBiase conglomerate is being built for a long-term situation or is just a brief alliance to set something else up. So we return to the ring for a match between Kwang and Mike Miraldo. And this was such an appreciated change of pace. Between the IRS match and the King's Court segment, the show kind of sagged there a bit. And I know I said the King's Court segment didn't drag in and of itself, but the fact that it was preceded by the IRS match didn't really help the pacing of the show overall. So Kwang got the win in a few minutes in a fairly impressive fashion. My only gripe is him using the mist to do a taunt. Like, that doesn't need to be a thing. He needs to stop doing that. He has literally won a match with a mist as a weapon. Doesn't need to do that. I did think it was hilarious at one point when Gorilla called a thrust kick a roundhouse kick. I just like, how do you make that mistake? I guess, I don't know, maybe I'll cut him some slack. But you never catch me making that much of a mistake. Like, oof. It was like Tony Schiavone calling the sidewalk slam a pile driver the other day. I'm sorry to harp on it so much. It's just like, it feels like a mistake that's hard to make, you know? Anyways, Kwang was pretty eccentric in his behavior. It was fun to watch with his array of kicks. A jumping, spinning back kick in particular is what got him the win. And not for nothing, it was believable with how flush it landed. This Miraldo guy can move as well. He really kept up the pace in this whole match, and despite being one of the longer enhancement matches on Raw, it felt shorter than most because of the pace it kept. My only hope is to see Kwang be put in a program soon. He's managed by Harvey, so him having a mouthpiece gives me hope. But then again, Atom Bomb was also a thing. So for the main event bout, we were set for Lex Luger in action against Dave Thornburg, and it was an okay match for the time it was given. Lex has some passable offense, but I feel like his matches need a narrative to drive them for them to really be interesting. I will say, there was this backbreaker he did at one point in the match that I thought could have been done better. Like, or Dave's kidneys. Notably, Ted DiBiase did poke out of the curtain for a moment to watch Lex, but headed back before the victory was scored. After the match, Lex posed in the spotlight for the crowd. His physique is impressive. After a plug for the replay of the King of the Ring, we cut to the back where we had DiBiase flanked by Nikolai Volkov and Bam Bigelow, touting that he amazes himself. He notes how he purchased Volkov, brought back his Undertaker, and acquired the services of Bam Bam. And I like how Nikolai started staring a hole through Ted. That made me happy that we haven't let that detail go. Ted DiBiase claims that it'll only be a matter of time before he claims Lex Luger, as everyone has a price. So that was Raw. It was an alright episode. I felt like it dragged a bit in the middle there, but some decent plot progression as we moved DiBiase's corporation stable along this episode. And it did make me interested in seeing the next one, so I say that's a win, right? Yeah. So, moving over to ECW, we get a replay shot of Rocco Rock getting hung by his ankles from the Eagle's Nest, as well as the show's intro proper complete with the 80s interlude rock. We cut over to the Funk Brothers on the way down to the ring for a match with Hack Myers and Steven Richards. Hilariously, the Funks are announced as together for the first time in 10 years this weekend, and Terry walks up to cut him off immediately. He's like, "I'm sorry, but we wrestled last night. I don't want you telling these people a lie now." Terry is great. Some charm to that. Before the match really got going, Hack and Steven got outside to jeer at the crowd over the respect they were paying the Funks a bit before the match. Sun Hat and Philly fella in the front row looked like he wanted Hack Myers to throw hands, like they were ready to go. So this match was a lot of fun. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. Like, really. Dory Funk Jr. has lifters for days. This man looks like a sack of old dirt in some wrestling boots, but he still got it. They mentioned how he first won the NWA World's Heavyweight title in 1969. 69? Like, that is almost... what's he doing here at the age of 55? Well, slinging uppercuts and dropping bodies. I was fully convinced that Dory was coming into this going to hold down the program because he was old and out of it, but he proved me wrong. And funny enough, when we first started watching ECW, when we got into 94, I was under the exact same impression, actually, with Terry Funk. And just like now with Dory, Terry proved me wrong then as well. So yeah, Steven Richards tossed about on the outside by Terry, who throws him in to take a double arm suplex from Dory. Dory taking back bumps. Love to see it. Got a nice elbow too before tagging back out. Terry let Hack get some work in with quite a few punches until he didn't. That being said, Terry got busted open, so Hack was tagging him with those hands. But Terry must be still feeling the effects of Hostile City Showdown, because bloody. But and that's for nothing. This was taped literally like a day after Hostile City Showdown. But yeah, on the outside, Dory got his hands on a chair and took it first to Hack while he was recuperating, and then to Steven Richards when he came around the ring. The latter of the two had a chair flung at him. It was rad. During the match, Willie Wack on commentary tells us that we're getting a tag team cage match between Douglas and Hughes and the Bruise brothers. But I didn't even care because we got a crowd-powered double-arm suplex from Dory to Hack Myers. It was a 1, 2, 3 times the charm, third time's the charm. It was nice. It was nice. 2 back-to-back super kicks from Steven Richards gets a 2 count on Terry Funk, which gives Willie Wack the highlight of his ECW commentary tenure thus far. And hey, Mom, I made it to the big time. 2 count on Terry Funk. The pile driver couldn't keep Richards down, so Terry slapped on a side headlock. I ain't talking rest hold side headlock either. Mans was trying to rub Steven's ear off of his head. Switched around with each arm. Him and Dory tagged in and out, trading off Steven Richards for this ringing headlock that was literally taking the life out of Steve. When Dory gets tagged back in, he hits an old-fashioned suplex, hooking the head for a 3 count and what was just good old wrestling for the finish. I loved it. This match was awesome. The Funks are something else. Oh, you don't want to go down from a pile driver to ya? Let's go back to the basics. It's nice. It's nice shit. So we smoothly transition into a recap of the match between the Funk Brothers and the Public Enemy before we transition to the Public Enemy back on the Bronx, in the Bronx rather, not on the Bronx. They are located in it. This was a very intense promo, almost too intense, I dare say. I did like a lot what they had to say in it, however. Rocco started off talking about how Terry Funk hung him upside down from the Eagle's Nest, accusingly claiming that Terry tried putting that rope around Rocco's neck beforehand. Straight up said that they tried to take Rocco's life, with Rocco claiming it was funny but didn't work. He says that on July 16, they'll get the Funks in barbed wire, detailing how he intends on brutalizing the two brothers with said barbed wire. Johnny Grunge takes the mic, and for what he lacks in intensity, he makes up for in volume. It was still very intense, but he was more concerned about yelling the promo than anything else in the delivery. He said that he was going to make the Funks look like road maps. He was going to run that barbed wire from one side of them to the other. That was both funny and badass. More the former than the latter. If his delivery was better, I think it'd have landed more intentionally, but I swear he was reading from a cue card or something while trying to yell the promo. Rocco definitely spoke more freely, but with the way Grunge is looking up at him, looking up at one thing most of the time and keeping the same cadence to his yell, I get that impression. He says that they went light on the Funks because they got a hard time from their grandma for beating on old men, but it don't matter anymore. Says that they're going down, that they're going down because it's Cream. And they quoted Cream by Wu-Tang Clan. That was a thing. Sounds like July 16th is ECW's next supercard. Lovely. A day before Bash at the Beach. Why did they do this to me? As for this promo, I liked it for how on brand it was for the two of them. It was a bit too much at times, but that's on par for the course with ECW. We got the rundown for Saturday's July 16, which is yet to be named, but it's on the Heat Wave Tour, so it stands to reason that's going to be the name of the card, right? So yeah, barbed wire tag team match between the Public Enemy and the Funk Brothers. And I can't believe Dory Funk is getting in there with this kind of stick. This will be wild for sure. Also confirmed, ECW heavyweight title match between Shane Douglas and Sabu, as well as a dueling Canes match between the Sandman and Tommy Cairo. Appreciate that they already have something on the card at least. I've been saying it for months. Let this be the end. Sandman and Cairo can go do other things. As for the ECW title match, interesting. This goes all the way back to the top of 94 with Shane Douglas and Paulie. This has the potential to be big. And speaking of the franchise, we cut over to Douglas alongside Mr. Hughes in the back, with a cage wall in front of them for effect. Shane Douglas starts off by commending ECW for having the guts to do what the WWF and WCW don't, and that is put a cage match on free television. I just realized that was a thing. How once upon a time, cage matches were such a spectacle, they needed to be paid for to be seen. In modern wrestling, cage matches are so often seen on TV that you'd never think they were highly regarded, even though the wrestlers in commentary always make a big deal out of when a cage match is announced. Shane goes on to refer to himself as a general and lists off historical genitals. Historical genitals, yeah, the dicks of history. The historical generals of the past. He states that they didn't achieve their goals by chance, it was by design. He continues to say that all of those generals had a plan. It was to take out some assets of the enemies and then divide and conquer. Shane makes the point that an asset of the Harris Boys is fighting outside the ring, and his, as the greatest wrestler of all time, is to keep it inside the ring because you can't win it outside. He concludes that this is why he requested and got this cage match and passed it over to Mr. Hughes. Now, Mr. Hughes is much less coherent in getting his point across, so I'm going to be much less detailed in my coverage of his half of this promo. He more or less rehashed every promo he's done in ECW thus far, while telling the Harris Boys that they aren't as bad as they make themselves out to be. He clarifies once again that he is the man to keep the gold on Shane's shoulder, and that they're going down for the last time. Shane's really reacting to Mr. Hughes like he just tore these boys asunder, with his "what more can I say" shrug and his cocky chuckle. But I feel like that promo would have stunk if not for him. I do think Mr. Hughes needs more material and better distribution of his energy for these promos because they are very samey. The first and even the second one were fun. They keep saying a lot of the same stuff week to week, and it's just running it into the ground. So we cut over to Nazi D and Nazi Dumb, and the same setup behind the cage wall. The first talks down Shane Douglas and his remarks about being a general, referring to themselves as a couple of buck privates. Says they're gonna get down in the trenches and that the trenches are the steel cage. Whatever, right? Passes the mic to Nazi Dumb. That fellow says that Mr. Hughes talks about being a protector, but when him and his brother get into some trouble and go down to the jailhouse, they get put into cages like this. A lot of implications here. Ones I'm sure they didn't even mean, but like, why are baby faces getting arrested frequently? This next line felt a little more intentional. He says when there's always one of you big old boys from the hood that think you're big and bad, and goes on from there. Like, I know there would be people who would make an argument against what I feel like that implies, but we see where he's going with that, right? I know I can just be like, they're Nazis, fuck them, and move on, but I feel like picking apart their bullshit because I had to sit through it. This feud is a double turn for both teams involved, even if that's not the intent or the future booking doesn't reflect it. I can't be convinced otherwise, especially because Shane's about to go into a program with Sabu and Paulie, other heels. It's just like, this feels like a soft baby's face turn to me, even though he's still a heel in nature by alignment, you know? So we get an ad for the ECW Academy and the upcoming live shows, and we get a recap of the ending to the Singapore Cane on a pole match. From scumbag to scumbag but kayfabe, we go to Sandman with woman in the back. He's looking at his pager after it beeps and says, obviously the chastity belt hasn't worked. Just, no. Woman's response made it worse with the "every man in town has a key" line. I'm not quoting it verbatim. And into screaming Tommy Cairo's name we go. Tells him to pay for his house, his bed, his car, and his wife. Woman affirms that Cairo should pay the man and then pay woman. Why? Why should he pay you? What? I appreciate the promo for being short, I guess, right? Everything else about it, though, gross. Moving on. So we cut over to the ring, where Shane is cutting a promo for the live crowd. He tells the Harris boys that everyone knows their ability outside of the ring, but the franchise is a mat technician, which is why he went to Todd Gordon specifically to get this match. He did it for two reasons: to keep the Philly POSs, pieces of shit, I might as well say it, out of the ring, and to keep the scum in it. Here's the part that made this interesting. They censored the word they censored when he said shit, but also when he said world and world's heavyweight champion. I found that interesting, because like, even if it's just a case of that being a mistake because it's not the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship in and of itself, it's still weird that they felt the need to censor that, right? Like, I don't know. I'm wondering if that's a thing or just me overanalyzing something. Sorry, I just also. Bruise Brothers theme music is too good for them. War Pigs by Black Sabbath, the disrespect. So they sprint to the ring, and scrap is on inside the cage, at least until order is restored and they return to their corners. And at this moment, Jesse and I were practically throwing feces at our screens with how irked we were that this was how the match was booked to be. Legal and tags inside the cage. We were informed that only the legal man can escape the cage to win. And obviously be pinned or submitted. And it's just like, that's so dumb to me. What is the purpose of this, you know? And to top off the confusion, Shane is trying to escape from the cage while he's the legal man, who started this off by saying that he set this all up to keep it in the ring. You know, I like, is that the heel hypocrisy thing? Even though everything in and out of character says that him and Hughes are the baby faces in this story? Hughes gets tagged in and takes control of the match and gets some frequent tags going with Shane to keep it that way. Willie Wack did another good when he brought up that Shane Douglas also held the world's tag team titles with Ricky Steamboat. He neglected to mention that Shane Douglas left the company in the middle of the title reign, however, but that's neither here nor there. He also goes on to note the history of Mr. Hughes and just how notorious of a bodyguard slash hitman of sorts for big names and world champions like he was. The match persists on for quite some time, with both Shane and the two fuckwads getting bloodied in it, but it was largely back and forth, with nothing exceptional happening. It was holds and throw into the cage and drop you with a clothesline for a good portion of this 20-minute match. There was a spot where Mr. Hughes was actively choking out one of the Harris boys, in a spot where the ref was being held up by trying to stop the other Bruise brother from getting into the match. Why is that necessary in a steel cage match where there is no DQ? Paul Lee, who joined commentary earlier, took a chance to question if Shane Douglas will still be the champion after July 16th when he defends against the only man to score a pinfall on them in the last 4 years, Sabu. We get Chad Austin versus Sabu for next week mentioned as well. Shane spends an egregious amount of time getting worked over by headlocks and suplexes before he finally takes a big boot that sends him into the cage door just as he calls for it to be opened. Mercifully, it's over. That being said, it was by escape, and that is the least definitive way to win a cage match. The Harris boys continue to slug on Mr. Hughes as he gets to the outside of the ring, kind of no-selling their shots, to check on Shane, as we cut to some mats. Very flat ending. I hate that these guys had to drag Shane Douglas down, but hopefully we can leave this feud behind and get into something good with Sabu. Mr. Hughes can be heavy and not a tag partner, and all will be right in the land of the hardcore. They recapped promos from Paulie and Cactus Jack after Hostile City Showdown, but that was all for ECW. In an episode that focused on Shane Douglas and Mr. Hughes versus the Bruise Brothers heavily, and hopefully for the last time. On top of being a promo-heavy show, this wasn't the best return show, but I also get that's not how return shows work in this era. The Funk Brothers match was awesome, though. I can't wait to see more of the Yester God Dory Funk Jr. So, with that being said, let's move on to some WCW. And we open with the factory overload intro and a rundown for the show that includes a WCW Tag Team title return match, a recap of the press conference, and an in-ring action for Brian Pillman, Steve Austin, and Johnny B. Bad. We go to the main set with Shivani, Heenan, and Okerlund. Heenan and Okerlund bicker while Tony tries to do his job and sending us off to the press conference recap. And I imagine they're starting off the show with that, seeing as they likely have a lot of new viewers for this episode, I'd imagine. Really just allowed me to push that Hogan was always a heel agenda of mine and others in wrestling YouTube to the watch-along audience. Nothing new around it. So we went back down to the ring for a match between Brian Pillman and Haito, which was a bit long, but exactly what it needed to be overall. Seems like we're getting a WCW Cyber Saturday, as commentary informs us that it's hotline calls to decide our matchups on next week's episode of Saturday Night. The crowd is really into Pillman here. They're white hot for everything he does, from a vaulting body press to an arm wringer. It's a shame that he's got nothing going on right now. I appreciate how much offense Haito got, as I'm hoping he gets used a bit more as well. But, you never know. My concern is that this is WCW showing us where they think Pillman should be on the card. Pillman gets the win off a diving clothesline of sorts. More like a Thez press, but I feel like he was going for a clothesline. That being said, a bit long, but it did well in showcasing Brian Pillman. Looking forward to seeing if they got a program in the works for him soon. So we take a break and return to the other half of the former Hollywood Blonde, stunning Steve Austin. We're coming down to the ring to face off with T.A. McCoy. As the match started, we got a picture-in-picture promo from Steve, ridiculing Steamboat for once upon a time taking the World Television title from him, as well as cutting him off in contendership for the World Championship. With the match, Austin displayed some great viciousness and sold even better when TA turned it around on him. Austin did not need to make McCoy look that good. Austin baited in McCoy and quickly started picking apart his leg, and very convincingly submits TA with a standing reverse figure four, now known as That's a Wrap. The match was half as long as Pillman's, and Austin won much more dominantly in a way. So I feel like that shows the difference between how the company views the both of them. It's a shame, too. Both should be at this level, at least. Sorry, I want more for Flying Brian. But that was also a great showcase for Austin to the aforementioned new reviewers. So we'll take that dub when we get them, you know? So we head to the control center with Mean Gene, who starts off with showing us a clip of Hogan training with George Foreman. Jimmy Hart counts really fast. We get several matches announced: Vader versus the Guardian Angel, Ricky Steamboat versus Steve Austin for the U.S. title, and Pretty Wonderful challenging for the tag titles. We then get a Hogan promo that is way too long and shit for several reasons. Jimmy Hart lets us know that this will be the biggest match in the Hulkster's life. Hogan chimes in, saying that there is not a thing in this world that lives or breathes that can stop him from getting what he wants. Politics are that strong, huh? He goes on to say that Ric Flair has been to the mountaintop 11 times, but Hogan has been there too, and when he's on the mountaintop, Ric Flair looks like his shadow at high noon. Hogan lays out that his master plan is in play, and come the pay-per-view, there will be no question who the man is. And I wish I wasn't being as literal as I was when I said that. Like, he really did, just like, my plan's coming to fruition kind of mentality at one point. He grabs Jimmy Hart by the shirt and aggressively shakes out his confirmation that he would hit Sherry, even interrupting an attempt at Jimmy cutting a promo on Sherry to demand a more direct answer. Like, Hogan is ruthless right now. I'll tell you something, counter was up by one here. We also get a promotion for Shaq and Mr. T to appear at the pay-per-view. Also confirmed for the show is Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck versus Dustin Rhodes and Arn Anderson. Can we replace Buck with Dory, please? I'd love that. Tori and Terry. That actually wouldn't have been very bad. I like Dory though, because it's so like, what, I don't think who Dory Funk is when I hear the name Dory. So back to the ring for a match between Johnny B. Bad and Chick Donovan. The first 3 minutes of the match was just headlocks and arm bars. The most interesting part was Bobby Heenan igniting Hulk Hogan on commentary over his politicking. No, but really, this match was straight out of 1951 with on 1.25 times speed until Johnny B. Bad turned up the heat with a Beal and a back body drop. Like, it really was just like, here's 3 holds to stretch out 4 minutes. I didn't like it. Getting the win off the double axe handle in just over 3 minutes did Johnny B. Bad, but the match certainly felt longer than that. Fair showcase for Johnny, I suppose, but they didn't really indicate what's next. On commentary, they noted that Johnny just kind of shrugged it off and said that he'll be a champion sooner or later in regards to having the title not, in fact, awarded to him at the pay-per-view. I just want to see something for him to do. His only story outside of this feud with Austin we've seen is his feud with Max Payne, and that's in like a year and a half of WCW that we've been watching. We cut over to the main set with Gene Okerlund, flanked by Harley Race and Vader. Gene congratulates Harley for his recent introduction before questioning if Harley heard the Guardian Angel's challenge last week, to which Race confirms. Harley points out that it was said that Vader is running from the Guardian Angel, but Vader runs from no one. And Vader gets the mic and tells us it's Vader time. Hell yeah, it is. He mentions that the whole world knows that Ray Traylor isn't man enough to stand toe-to-toe with Vader. Vader says that he's already taken his pride, his integrity, and you should call him Boss Vader because he's already taken his name. I thought that line was savage. He says that he's right there, live and in color, that he's not hard to find, and at Bash at the Beach, it's Vader time one more time before walking off. Vader is awesome, man. So savage in every aspect. He's like the Broly of wrestling. The legendary hybrid heavyweight Vader. I get the feeling he's going to eat Rey alive. Maybe I'm just hoping for it. Not quite sure. I do think it should happen, though. Back down to the ring we go for our main event return bout for the WCW World Tag Team titles. Cactus seemed to have a bit more operable shoulder this time around, but we start off with Sullivan and Knobbs in the ring. Sullivan has a mighty presence for being one of the smallest guys in this era. This match didn't take long to break down into an ECW style match, with the ref seeing blatant use of the steps as a weapon. Didn't call it. Hardcore is in the veins of these four men as they brawl ruthlessly, and Nick Patrick was very generous to not throw out the match at any point. Once the match got a bit more under control, the second act is pretty much Jack in peril as the Nasty Boys worked him over something fierce. Once, just as Kevin Sullivan got a proper hot tack and started running wild, Paul and Paul of Pretty Wonderful run out and start attacking Dave Sullivan on the outside. And they start laying into his bum knee with the crutch. Eventually, Kevin is taken down by Knobbs on the inside of the ring and leans up against the ropes, just in place so he can get whacked in the back by the crutch, falling into position to take the pinfall from Kevin, which led to the retention of the titles. I made it sound like they was like overly staged, but it did happen pretty smoothly, I would say. Right after the match, Kevin finally becomes aware of the beatdown and slides out to check on his brother. He runs off set after the Nasty Boys as the young boys of WCW come out to check on Dave Sullivan instead. I didn't know WCW had young boys. The match was fun for what it was. I wasn't exactly begging for a 10-plus minute match between these two a week out from their last bout. But hopefully this... but this didn't exactly feel main event either. Still, Kevin and Jack are still champs, and hopefully this means that the Nasty Boys stay away from the title picture for some time. Just a little bit. I just need them out of the title picture for a little bit, please. And we return from break to Ric Flair and Sensuous Sherry on the main set with Gene Okerlund. Gene was asked by Rick if he's seen the paper and promotes the upcoming title match as the biggest match in the history of professional wrestling. That's because he is billed as the champion and Hogan is billed as the challenger. He says that that's the difference, and Hogan can pull any political string he wants and get Sherry barred from the press conference or from the big show next week. But at Bash at the Beach, it's Hogan, Flair, and the Sensuous One. The bottom line is that it's Ric Flair the champion versus Hulk Hogan the challenger. Tell you something, counter up by one from Sherry. Sherry tells Hogan that he can pull out all the stops and bring in all the stars, but he hasn't done anything yet. She exclaims that she's going to be there and that he better not think he can get the best of her ever. She yells over Gene's outro of the show, and that was Saturday Night. Not the most eventful, but it was an easy watch. Still, the hostile takeover is proceeding smoothly. This will be Hogan Land before long. I see it now. Next week's episode is shaping up to be a big one, so hopefully some fun stuff there with the stories that aren't Flair Hogan. So I hope y'all enjoyed this week's Talkkcade. To tell you something, counter was only at 2 this week, as far as I heard. Both in WCW from Jimmy Hart and Sherry, respectively. And this week was a fairly mundane one in comparison to previous weeks, but I'm thankful for that. Apologies for the delay in getting this episode of Talkkcade out as well. A few weeks in a row, there was no Retro WatchaMania, so I took advantage of that to put off Talkkcade in favor of focusing on my move, hence the new setup. So, yeah. Do drop a thumbs up on this video if you'd be so kind. And do join us throughout the week for the several different things we watch along to. First things first, Retro WatchaMania. It's effectively the precursor to this podcast. As my first time viewing of this wrestling that we're reviewing, is done with Jesse on Sundays, 7 p.m. BST, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, over at twitch.tv/CFGSouth. Here on the YouTube, however, we do weekly watch-alongs of all AEW programming. All of it. Dynamite, Rampage, Battle of the Belts, pay-per-views. We're not exclusively AEW, but that's the only one we prioritize on the modern end for watch-alongs at the moment, just because of scheduling and, interest. Additionally, if you like gaming in any way, Jesse puts together the WatchMania Invitational. 8 members of the community are represented by randomized NPCs in the game of the Champion's Choice. That typically is on Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, Saturday, 12 a.m. PST, before Rampage. But that's all from me, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Happy wrestling. I'm Abby Devin. Until next time.